So if you've been here for the last couple of weeks, you may have had a little information on what we call the 12 powers of now that one of our Unity co-founders, Charles Fillmore, wrote a book about. And he talks about where we have 12 innate powers within us, and they are set in different areas in our bodies. And he also relates them to each of Jesus Christ's disciples. So from what I understand, you've heard about faith already, and last week you heard about imagination. They both happen to be in the head area. And now I'm going to talk about the power of will, which happens to be right at the front of the forehead as well. But before I start, I'd like to tell you a little story about a beautiful Sunday morning, kind of like this one, where the pastor announces to the congregation, "I have here in my hands 3 sermons. A $100 sermon that will last 5 minutes, a $50 sermon that will last 15 minutes, and a $10 sermon that will last a full hour." Now we're going to collect the tithe and see which one you chose. So yes, the power of will is about your ability to choose, to decide, to direct, to command. And as I mentioned, we have a disciple for each of the powers. The disciple for the power of will is Matthew. And if you think about what Matthew represents or how he was or would have been, he would have had to have thick skin and have strong will because he was a tax collector. And I know it doesn't happen here, but back in the day, people did not like tax collectors. And yes, we actually have a color for each of the powers. And for today is silver. And this is as close as I could get to silver, so I brought this tie, FYI. Charles Fillmore, in his Revealing Word, which is a book where he takes words and gives them metaphysical meaning, says that will is the executive faculty of the mind, the determining factor in man. What man wills or decrees comes to pass in his experience. And we add a Bible verse for this one, and it's from Job 22:28. And it reads, "You will decide on a matter, and it will be established for you, and light will shine on your ways." I was talking about the color. I hadn't really thought much about the colors with all the different disciples and all the different faculties, the powers. So I decided to look it up for this time. And it kind of works, I think. The color silver is believed to be a mirror to the soul, helping us to see ourselves as others see us. It is a color of strength, of clarity, and focus. The true color of purity, so that we may be pure to ourselves and see our strengths and what we need to improve upon. So I was saying about how the powers, there's three powers that are all in the head. And one of them, actually there's 4. One of them is understanding. And understanding is the ability to perceive and to spiritually see. And this understanding, I mentioned a bit because it is closely related to the power of will. We can say will determines the movement, understanding decrees the direction. Now, more simply put, the will carries out what we understand or accept as true. I'll say that again. The will carries out what we understand or accept as true. Charles Fillmore, in one of his other books called Christian Healing, also talks about will, and he says that will is the executive faculty of the mind and carries out the edicts of the I am. So yes, will is our power to choose and decide, as well as the ability to command and direct the choices and actions that we have taken. Now, think about it from the moment you wake up. I think that very split second that you wake up, I think you have an immediate choice that you make. It could be, do I want to get up from bed or do I want to stay lying down a little more? Do I want to get up? And maybe, hopefully, a lot of you are doing it. Do a little prayer meditation, maybe a little stretching, stretch the body that we need, especially as we get older. I'm speaking for myself here. If I don't get up in the morning and do some stretches, in mid-afternoon or so, my back starts hurting. So yes, I need to get up and make the choice that I'm going to stretch. I'm going to do a little prayer meditation, and I hope you are doing something similar. Of course, we make decisions, what to wear, what to have for breakfast, or even if we don't want to have breakfast. And throughout the day, we're making decisions constantly. Most of the time, believe it or not, you don't realize that you're doing it, do you? We only take account of it when we think it's a decision that we have to make that is more crucial for what we do for our lives. So we make decisions, we use our power of will constantly for all things, but how many think that, let me ask by a show of hands, how many of you think that you have a strong will, that once you make a decision, you stick with it? Wow, you guys are better than I thought. Maybe I shouldn't ask the next question. How many of you have made a New Year's resolution? And how many have kept it for the whole year? All right, I don't see as many hands anymore. There you go. Well, that's why Unity Minister Winifred Wilkinson Hausman, in her book that she wrote, Your God-Given Potential, Unfolding the 12 Spiritual Powers, yes, it's about the 12 powers, of course, she talks about that we have to re-educate our will, because throughout our lives, our will, I'm going to say, hasn't really been educated, because we kind of don't think about it till we start considering what we're doing in our lives and what we need to be doing. So yes, we need to start re-educating our will. And we see an example where Jesus shows us how best to do this. And it is from Luke chapter 22, verses 42 and 43. And we read, Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. Now, Winifred Hausman tells us that this, as most everybody would think, this was not a prayer of submission to negation and suffering, as many people believe. Rather, it was a prayer of surrender to the all-wise, all-knowing mind of God. Think about that. Surrendering to the all-wise, all-knowing mind of God. Now I added, at the end, after the yours wills be done, I added then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. Because I think that once we follow that divine guidance, that divine will, we grow in strength, because we know that what we're doing is for the highest good of everyone involved, including ourselves. Now, how do we go about re-educating our will? I would say the easiest thing is practice, and we can think of it as practice. I mean, even doctors, what they do, they call it practice. So why don't we practice being our highest selves? So I got 3 things. Be conscious of your decisions, pray and meditate, and stop, relax, and breathe when you have to take a decision. So yes, be conscious of your decisions. And what I mean by that is try, when you get up in the morning, to make a conscious decision, first decision there, that throughout the day, as you're making the decisions, try to become conscious of it. And yes, I know you're not going to be able to do keep track of every single one, because who knows how many hundreds of decisions or maybe thousands we're making throughout the day. But when you become aware of it, keep practicing that, so that the more you become aware of it, the more you become aware of how you're making those decisions or why you're making your decisions. Are you making them from your lower consciousness, out of fear, out of lack and limitation? Or are you making them from a higher consciousness, knowing that you are aligning yourself with the divine, so that the decisions you're making, you know it is for the highest good of all, and it will work better for everyone and everything that you're doing? Now, I like to think that to get better at this practice of being conscious of your decisions throughout the day, believe it or not, is to get up in the morning, or some people like to do it right before they go to bed, do a constant daily prayer and meditation. And I'm not trying to call you out here, but who likes to do a little prayer meditation daily? Wonderful, wonderful. I think I'm in the right room. Wonderful. So yes, prayer and meditation, believe it or not, actually helps us to be more conscious of ourselves as we're moving through the day making decisions. It just so happens that while I was working on this, I briefly caught an interview with Novak Djokovic, who arguably is probably the best tennis player ever, in the men's, I should say. And he was talking about that most of the time he had won the game even before he set foot on the court, because of his preparation. His daily preparation, not only of physically practicing his craft, but his mindset. I didn't realize that, but apparently he's very spiritual. And he's always working on his mindset, visualizing what it is that he's going to do on the court, what it is that he's going to be doing throughout his day during his life. So yes, if you pray and meditate, you are winning the game of being aware of your decisions. Think of it that way. And along the lines of this, of course, when you become aware of your decisions, that third step, stop, relax, breathe. The moment you find yourself that you need to make a decision, whether you think it's the simplest thing that means nothing, or a decision that could change your life, stop, take a deep breath, just relax. And I have to say, those decisions that you think are minor, some of them actually are the biggest decisions of your life. And I'm sure some of you have experienced this by now. I know I have. So yes, it is very important that we work on our power of will. And Charles Fillmore, in his book, The 12 Powers of Man, tells us that the will moves to action all the other faculties of mind. Think about that. I've heard before that faith is very important and maybe the most important, but maybe will might be up there, because if will is what moves the rest of your other powers, the rest of your other faculties, then I would put that up there very close to the top with faith. Now, to give us an idea how these faculties will takes all these faculties and sets them into motion. Paul Hasselbeck and Cher Holton, in their book Power Up, which is also about the 12 powers, they say every day we choose what we believe. That's the power of faith. When and for what we stay the course, that's the power of strength. What we judge and when we apply what we know, that's our power of judgment or wisdom. What we desire, need, require, and for whom we have the highest regard, that's our power of love. What we master or have dominion over, that's our faculty of power or dominion. What we visualize, that's imagination. What we know, that's understanding. When and what we organize, sequence, or adjust, that's our power of order. What we are passionate about, that's our power of zeal. What we deny or get rid of, that's our power of elimination or renunciation. And last but not least, what we vitalize or enliven, that's our power of life, our faculty of life. And to further give you the importance of all these 12 powers, Charles Fillmore, again, in his book Keep a True Lent, says, man's body temple is the outer expression of the Garden of Eden. Stay with me. Man's body temple is the outer expression of the Garden of Eden, which God gave him to keep and to trim. The Garden of Eden has 12 gates, each representing one of the disciples. So if we look at the disciples and the fact that this is our 12 innate powers, so those gates are our entrance into our divinity. So the more we work on our powers, the more we work on all these faculties that we have, the easier it'll be for us to be in our Garden of Eden. As I mentioned before, the best way to use our power of will is, of course, from our highest consciousness. So let's remember, easy. It may not seem sometimes that anything's happening, but the best way, really, I go back, prayer and meditation, and being conscious of what you're doing, what you're deciding throughout the day. The more you do this, the more you are aligned with God's mind, and we like to, I'm sorry, yes? Yes, I don't know if you heard her, and I probably couldn't have said it better myself. But basically, when we are aligning with our divine, and we are aligning with that divine will, God is really with us. And she actually got ahead of me, because I'm getting to something like that. The decisions that I've made throughout my life, sometimes, like I said, we make decisions out of our lowest consciousness, and we decide on what to do or what not to do, where to go or where not to go, out of fear and limitation. And it makes me think that I thought that's what I was doing when I made the decision to read a book that a friend recommended so that I can become a better salesman. And that's all I was thinking about. But little did I know that even though it was a decision kind of from a lower consciousness, God had a better plan for me. God was there with me. Because I came to realize by the end of that book that this book was about becoming a better person, a better me. And that got me into this path of wanting to learn more about how I can be better. Yes, my original My original thought was I want to have better self-esteem. And along those lines, I thought this book, which was, by the way, Zig Ziglar's See You at the Top, was about becoming a better me. That got me into reading Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, who introduced me to A Course in Miracles. And because of that, I ended up at this church. I did not know that, in truth, that decision that I had made was, even though I was not conscious of it, that higher consciousness was still with me, and it made the decision to get me to where I was going, to eventually go into ministerial school and to become a unity minister. Let's do a little exercise, if you will. If I can have you close your eyes for a second. And this is easy. Don't worry about it. Think of a minor, simple decision that you made this morning already. It could have been which way to come here, where to sit in the sanctuary, whether it was because you wanted not to be seen, or because you wanted to be in the best place to see and hear better. Now just consider where that decision came from. Just be aware of it. I'm not judging. There's nothing about judging anything about it. Just consider how that decision came about. Now think back for this past week, this past few days, of a more pressing decision that you had to make. How did you make that decision? If you haven't made the decision yet, consider going into a little prayer and meditation time. And I would suggest that after you come out of that, whether you get something or not, just start writing whatever comes to your mind. And if not, sleep on it, literally. And I would suggest the next morning when you wake up, pick up that pen and paper and start journaling whatever comes up. And maybe a decision will be there for you. And trust that that decision is what is the highest for you. Thank you for humoring me. I mentioned A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles talks about the will also. And I'm just going to mention a few phrases about will and that the Course in Miracles talks about. The will of the Father and of the Son are one. And this is similar to what Mia was talking about. Our will and God's will is really one will. We just have to become aware of it. We think that if we surrender our will to God, that we're surrendering our control, but in truth, we are coming more into the control of what we truly are. Which takes me to my next one. This is about, of course, the Course in Miracles. The goal of the curriculum, regardless of the teacher you choose, remember that, regardless of the teacher you choose, is know thyself. So to follow your highest will, God's will, is truly to know thyself, to know yourself. What do we talk about? That we are what? Children of God. If we're children of God, then why not realize and accept that we truly are divine? Who believes that here? Anybody? Wonderful. Most of you. I'll take that as a positive. Another one. If God's will for you is complete peace and joy, unless you experience only this, you must be refusing to acknowledge His will. Now, I'll say that simply because A Course in Miracles likes to give you sentences kind of like this, and you don't know which way it's going. But it's basically saying that if you are not following God's will, you are not acknowledging yourself. And this one that you might not think about, healing reflects our joined will. Healing is the way in which the separation is overcome. Now you might be thinking, what are you talking about? The Course talks about that the only healing that we need is to know that we are one with God. When we think that we are separate from God, that's when we are not doing well, when we are ill, if you will. No pun intended. So yes, you want to know that your will is God's will and God's will is your will. And one last mention, we have heard it before that we all have free will, haven't we? Your will, this is Jesus talking, by the way, your will is as free as mine, and God himself would not go against it. What does that mean? If we all have free will, God is not going to force you to do something that you're not ready for. The Course says that Jesus Christ will wait till you're ready to align yourself with God and with your Christ within, as we like to call it here in Unity. Speaking of will, what did the lawyer ask when someone started talking about God's will? Was it notarized? So let's review. Will is the ability to choose, to decide, to command, direct, and determine. Will is the executive power of the mind. Will is closely linked to the power of understanding, and that's why we are constantly using our knowing and our understanding to make this decision and go and use the power of will. The will carries out what we understand or accept as true. Since we're using understanding together with will, we know that the will carry out what we understand or that we accept as true. Now, how do we work on the will again? Be conscious of your decisions as you're going throughout the day. Be conscious of every decision that you're making. And if you want to get better at it, pray and meditate daily. That is kind of like winning the game before you get on the court. And yes, as you're going through the day and you catch yourself making a decision, stop, relax, take a deep breath, and then make a decision. And more often than not, you'll know that that decision will be the best decision that you could have made at that moment. And if it wasn't, it will be down the road, because whatever you're going through, just like when I thought I was just reading a book to become a better salesman, I was reading a book, and this is many, many years ago, to become a Unity ordained minister. So yes, if you want to know your will, your true will, know that you are knowing your true self.